They say we should have known better than to fall so deep down into this rabbit hole we found. And I was thinking,
hi, this is Nico. You're listening to my dad will fall, also known as the White Rabbit, and James Jardine on the one and only Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. Buckle up and enjoy.
deep into this pool of regrettable situations. Pitch black, think back to the last time that we were happy.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome down to Security Rabbit Hole, to a Jamesless edition of the Down to Security Rabbit Hole podcast, because sometimes work gets in the way of fun. But as I promised last episode, we're gonna have Justin back on. We're gonna talk more access control, and he's already giving me the pre-show disclaimer. He's like, "Oh man, I didn't, I'm not a network access control guy." I'm like, you know all about this stuff. No, but here we are. We're doing a follow-up to the previous episode, and I want to talk the kind of the history and where we are with the network-based network access control, and then maybe we'll figure out whether cloud means anything, if that's done anything for us, positive or negative, the whole work from home thing. But quick round of introductions for those of you this is the first episode you're ever listening to. James is absent, but on the far that way. Yes. Okay. Far edge that way. I'm learning. Give me a minute. Jim Tiller, welcome back, sir.
Hey, thanks, Raph. How's it going?
Pretty good. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. It's a gorgeously sunny 87 degrees or so today, and it's gonna be a good day to podcast. In the middle there, our guest of honor returning, Mr. Justin Foster. How are you, sir?
Good. Thanks for having me back.
You know, you were so fun the first time. We had to get you back, but now you're in a proper office where your equipment won't overheat and cause you to literally blank out for periods at a time.
Yes. This camera is a little bit less sensitive than my home one. By the way, behind me is I have a totally digital front here, so I wanted something completely analog behind me. So a proper tube amp and record player.
Wow, you so
fully analog.
I do have a record player. I don't have it visible in the show because my shelves are too narrow and too short. They're little cubes. But at some point, guys, we really need to do like a what's behind you. And this is my new addition, my digital frame. And it doesn't always come in perfectly, but now I've got my daughter sitting there staring at me, which is kind of awesome. Cycling through photos and such, and then you get. But anyway, I love the view. Jim, I'm one of these days, man. The door is open from what I can see, and it is. You did that on purpose. Oh, you're killing me. I'm like, wait a minute. James is going to be so mad that he missed that. That is the classic horror movie moment. That is fantastic. Well done, sir. You got me. I did not expect it to be this episode. You got me. I love it. All right. Fun stuff. Let's talk about access control. So, Justin, I like my first thoughts of access control were many moons ago when we just plugged stuff into the hub. Like there was no switch yet, so hubs were everywhere. Access control was not a thing, and the way you denied somebody access is by going in physically, taking their wire and putting a pair of scissors through it. That would be denial of access at the physical level. Over time, we eventually got switches. Some of us because we were modernizing, and some of us because malware viruses at the time were ravaging our networks. We had no other way of shutting them down, short of actually removing old Cabletron hubs and putting in Cisco switches. And then along came this idea of NAC. And that's, ladies and gentlemen, where our story begins, as the storytellers say, right? So, do you guys remember the NAC days? The good old, maybe not so good old days?
they're still happening, right? You know, Forescout was formed 24 years ago, actually this April.
Holy
So
crap.
yeah, and it's still we're still the market leader for network access control. We think of it more as network security, but certainly NAC is at the cornerstone of that, right? The idea that you can block devices, but it's gone way beyond that. You know, it started with an ideal many years ago, like 20 years ago, of I want to control what's on my network. Makes sense, right? Like I don't want somebody walking into my bank, plugging in a in a loose Ethernet port and downloading all my information. And that was largely before, a lot of internal systems had encryption or had access control. So you have like wide open databases that, it's secure because it's on my local network. Well, your local network isn't so secure, right? I remember walking into a clinic one time and they were clearly having overheating issues in their server closet. It was just a closet. So they cut a hole in the door about this big, like you could crawl in it, and there wasn't even a grate. And behind it, you could see the Ethernet ports and USB ports, and it's just like, wow. So it started with that basic idea, but it's evolved certainly since then into more of a world of automation.
Well, look, my first attempts at and kind of peeling this back just a little bit, back when we had malware running around and we were working at GE, we had a script that would take from our IPSs a bad actor on the network. It would then hit up the CAM table to go do a lookup and then take that MAC address and the switch name and email it to NetOps and say, hey, drop that switch port. Like there was no automated way of doing it at the time. Yeah. And we all kind of thought, man, if there was just a way to automate this and make it easier. Well, our wish was granted and a Forescout rep showed up. But I gotta say, so back in those days, and this isn't knocking anything, this is just the reality of it, right? When technology is new, it's never just like drop it in and make it work. And so we were hoping for some version of ideal, and it turned out all of our switches were too old. So buy all new switches. The ones that weren't had to be configured and all that stuff had to run. And we faced some challenges, but it was, once we got through that, right? Because there's just a period of adopting that technology. It got better. Like the idea of knowing what you've got, and then, as I understood, and I'm not a NAC expert by any stretch of the imagination, but what I recall is it would you plug in, and that sensor would then interrogate. It was agentless at the time. And it would interrogate essentially like, hey, do I know who you are? Matt, do I know this MAC address? And if I don't, then you're not going to be allowed. And then we try to go. It was an agent at that point, right? You added an agent, and then the agent have an optional agent, and it would like pull AD and try to get you match up user and machine, and then it would do like what's on this system that you're running, and it's evolved over time. Can you talk me through some of that evolution? Because I know you know it all.
Well, so, there's pre-connect and there's post-connect. So pre-connect is the idea of, I'm using something like 802.1x to say, this is an authorized device, I authenticate and I connect to the network. Honestly, that's rarely used because it only works for IT. It doesn't work for OT devices, building automation, SCADA systems, HVAC systems, IoT devices, smart TVs, the range is huge. Then there's post-connect, and post-connect is the idea of like, let's go deeper on that machine. And so, we do use agentless technology. We can either remotely SSH or RDP into the box with credentials, go assess it, and then dissolve. For those that don't want to give centralized credentials, we have a proxy agent. Basically, it's a reverse proxy agent called Secure Connect that's able to provide that introspection. But the idea is, are you running the right version of the operating system? Are you patched? Do you have the security controls installed that you are required by your organization? Do you have the computer management, the ITSM controls installed? And you can only do that with introspection. You can only do that by learning what that device is configured by. And then you get things like Heartbleed. I want to identify which machines are running those libraries. So looking deeper at kind of the SBOM of what's running inside that device is a critical part. So we assess about 1,000 attributes about any given device to be able to make those assessments. And one other thing Raphael mentioned is NAC is sort of a misnomer. most people don't just do pure binary, like, hey, on the network, off the network.
Right.
It's really a spectrum. Like, maybe instead of quarantine, I want to move it to the guest network, something less stringent. Or maybe instead of turning off a switch port, I want to change a wireless user role. Or instead of blocking wireless or VPN access, maybe I assign them to a self-remediation VLAN where only IT or security can come remotely access that device, right?
That's good. So let's expand, because I like this. Let's go to pre-connect world first. How much? Because that's where everything I think started in the pre-connect world, right? We didn't have the agents and all that, so we could just kind of made. Is the expectation there then that you have a certain number of systems that you identify, pre-authorize, and everybody else is kind of? We'll talk about how they're excluded, but they're excluded. Is that how that works?
Yeah. So first, knowing what you have, right? And usually, if you're going to do a pre-connect, you can do an inclusion list of these are the authorized MAC addresses that are going to join. You have to do that differently for LAN versus Wi-Fi, obviously, or you use a system like Radius. That's very laborious. Things change. Some companies send their users to the Mac store, the Apple store, to go do servicing and replace hardware and stuff instead of, So how do you maintain that central device list? Honestly, most organizations don't do that. It's just too laborious, too prone to error. And then you got BYOD messing everything up, right?
And I imagine for high security applications where a lab, an agency, someplace that security is tightened, rather than just kind of the standard corporate fare, that may actually work. Where you're like, okay, step one is if you're not known, then you're not getting a power on that port, or you're not getting access to that port anyway. Is that fair?
Yeah. There's levels of network, right? There's sort of the campus network. If you're in oil and gas distribution, all of your signaling and control is done separately. So segmenting your network gives you options. Like, say you're a hospital and you have biomed on a totally different network than the laptops that are at the doctor and nurse's station, which is good practice, right? Then you can go through a process of whitelisting the biomed devices and say, these are the only authorized ones on that network. But if you try to do that with one general flat network for all, I'm sure, Jim, like the more you carve up the organization, the easier it is to secure, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say that earlier, is a lot of times when you can segment off a floor, like you said, of a hospital or a university or an office where you have systems, if you can do that, absolutely. It's just when you try to, like you said earlier, when you try to do it across everything, and then you're mixing in servers, dedicated workstations with BYOD and then OT, it's just it's not a one size fits all. But there are times when it can be super, super helpful if you have a lot of confidence that those systems are not going to change.
So let me give you some interesting stats, Raf. We have over 3,000 customers. I kind of like to call them clients because I don't like the word customer word, right? We're constantly working with them, providing value. You've got to make sure that everything's the way they want it. And we have actually tens of millions of classified device types. The other interesting part is, you could go with a NAC or some type of network automation or control from a given vendor like Cisco ICE. But what happens if you don't have a homogeneous network? What happens if that acquisition has Arista switches? Or what happens if, the new office building has Juniper in it? We work like Switzerland, where we have to work with all the major vendors, because most networks are not, unified like that. The newer switches we can actually even install inside the switch, which is really cool. They've now created virtualization inside the switch to run software-defined networking. But then you've got super old equipment that's been aging on racks forever, right? So you got to work across the spectrum.
Talk to me. So, okay, pre-connect, post-connect. Talk to me about, let's dive a little bit deeper on the pre-connect world, but the non-human computer devices.
Yeah.
What are my options there? Are they good?
So we call it unmanageable, right? When you can't put an agent on it, it's an unmanaged device.
I've been called that once or twice.
I'm sure probably by your wife. And most of those unmanageable systems can't take an agent. They're either locked down or they're don't have the computing power to run some type of agent or introspection. We talked on the last episode about using a network-based approach. Yes, you can actively scan for them, but you don't want to take down their TCP stacks. So usually you're passively, understanding the protocols and traffic. And they speak a lot of really old protocols, right? There's 250 different OT protocols. And then you get into IoT, it's getting a bit better because IoT, like my, Zoom Connect phone and the smart TV and all that kind of stuff that's at the office here, they tend to be, much more secure and patchable, but you still can't put an agent on them. So it's about assessing what that device is and what access it should have. So we don't just do NAC, we do segmentation, we do risk management, we do threat. So we can react to things like, risk-based segmentation. This is a risky device, hasn't been patched for a while. Should it be on the same network as these other devices? Or threat-based response. We see a threat, let's go and isolate that device until we can actually do an investigation. So NAC was born in a simple binary state, but it's evolved so much more. And to be honest, the post connect is much more interesting because the data that you have is much more vibrant, right? If it's just pre-connect, you have very, very basic details to make that judgment. And sometimes it's wrong. And even if you do post connect, you got to do it continuously. Because even though it's in a good state now, somebody just clicked a Russian email, downloaded a backdoor from a phishing attempt, and now my device is not safe. Well, they're easy to pick on, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So listen, let's talk post connect and sort of the evolution of that. Once you get the agent on there, I think that it's kind of a game changer. You can know a lot. You said how many thousands of things? You said something about how many thousands pieces of telemetry you have or data points.
We have 10 million unique device types. These are unique individual vendor, over 10 million device types. We have some clients that have 3 million devices in one environment. Actually, one energy producer thought they had 190,000 devices. And when we deployed, we found 50,000 IP carrying devices they had no idea they had.
I wish that surprised. I really wish that surprised me. But I have been in too many of those situations where, you go into my story I told probably a million times, went into a company, an auto industrial company. And Jim working for you at the time, and the CIO gave me we're going to develop their new security strategy. The CIO hands me a report from E&Y about 5 inches thick of all the issues and things identified with all 1,200 of their assets, and I can't help but look over my shoulder past the glass of the beautiful conference floor room. Out into the shop floor, machines are doing, making car parts. And I was like, well, does that include those things out there? And he goes, oh, no, those are out of scope. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. That's the important stuff, buddy. And they had like 10x of things that pulled IP addresses. And out of all of those, a vast majority were Jim, I don't remember the date exactly, but 20, 14, 15?
I was going to say 2012.
Okay, maybe then. It was all NT4.
Yeah. And yeah. And we always say things like you don't know what you don't know, and people immediately assign that a very small margin. You don't know what you don't know. And like, well, I know everything. So whatever I don't know must be a really small thing. And when you actually go and you do an investigation, you find out that it's this vast percentage of your environment.
Yeah.
And the example you just gave was 50% greater than what they thought they had.
Yeah. What's really strange is this is 2024, and just now major OT projects are getting started. Like, oh, that was somebody else's problem. That was the factory floor. That was the biomed team. That was whatever. Not my problem in security. I'm working with multiple Fortune 50s that are just starting their OT security journey now. And it surprises me, but it's always been the last, the ugly stepchild of the IT security world.
But it makes sense because those are all the devices that are low power. that generally don't have storage. They're not easily upgradable. They're either running some industrial operating system, ONX or QNX, ONX, QNX, some bastardized version of Linux, or the newer ones running a crazy version of Android, right? Something of that nature. And no, you can't put an agent on it. You can't properly interrogate the TCP stack. And when you say you don't want to kick it over, boy, do I have stories for you on things that you're like, I'll just port scan that, and the machine dies, and then like you have to fill out reports for weeks.
But that's also it's being left to the end. But we all know that OT is like what's opening and closing valves and throwing switches. And so we say, what's a business? And I think this is where in some cases we get a little lost in like, oh, it's the computers and it's the information flowing around. That's everything. But for some companies, it's making the robot do the robot thing.
Yeah.
And the fact that, Justin, you're working on, Fortune 550 companies just now dealing with this. I mean, that's where they're kind of making their money there a little bit, I would assume.
Yeah, it's just those environments are complicated because you can't just take off take a IDS IPS, stick it in a warehouse with robots wandering around moving packages around, or stick it in a assembly plant, right? You can. It's not going to do much. It's not going to do much, right? Because it doesn't understand the protocols. It doesn't understand what's going on. We bought a company in 2018 called Security Matters. And they specialize in only OT security. I think they were way ahead of their time, but they look at asset identification, they look at risk management, they do a network-based IDS for OT. So safe, it's not going to disrupt anything, but it's looking at, backdoors, and it's looking at command and control traffic, and it's looking at, improbable traffic between Purdue levels, right? And it can map all that out and show it visually. Only now do we see people going, oh, yeah, this stuff's really important, right? This stuff's really critical to our infrastructure, right? We're seeing gas pipelines get shut down. Major hospitals get, disabled to the point where they can't give patient care. Yeah. So, while we started NAC, we spend a lot more time now on OT security, IDS-based detections, and risk. Risk is huge. Like, if you have all these data points, so what? Can I correlate the CVEs that you have to known exploited vulnerabilities, KEVs, to say this one's more important? Or can I tie this back to which threat actor, and therefore maybe they're targeting you and we should, employ additional defenses on that. So it's become, much, much more than NAC to have a proper picture. It's become more of a idea of security automation, really.
Yeah. I'm thinking of the modern workplace and sort of I'll say, hybrid environments. That word has been vastly overused. And as Inigo Montoya once said, you keep using that word, I do not think it means what you think it means. But we have environments where some employees, work from home. Some employees work from office. Some employees work in factory. Some employees work in remote locations on oil rigs and processing plants and all sorts of things. And all of those places, you need to know at least a couple of things. What's on my network? Should it be there? And what is it doing? Right. And I feel like, given everything you said, we may be getting close to having that an answerable question, or those answerable questions answered, maybe. But I don't think we're there yet.
I think the problem's only going to explode as we deploy modern technology. I was in a grocery store, and now they have the tags, instead of going around and doing the sales, they're little e-ink displays, right? Each of those is
yeah.
Each of those is a little computer. Yeah. Each of those is a tiny computer carrying an IP. There are military programs developing body armor and systems on a soldier that have over 20 unique IPs on that body.
What?
Like,
actually, that's actually a conservative number.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on.
So, imagine all these devices need to be patched, updated, know what they're talking to, know if they're, it's only exploding from here. I'm sure both of you have a lot of home automation inside your house. organizations are becoming like that too, right? Where I mean, how many IPs are you on your body right now, right? I've got AirPods on. I have a pair of Meta sunglasses.
You got this Meta. Oh, you're such.
Oh, they're great. They're the best thing ever. I've got my watch or my phone. Like I've got multiple devices on my body as it is, right? So I think the only way to get on top of it is, number one, know what you have. Be able to take automations, whether that's pre-connect, post-connect, or less stringent things like put in isolation zones. Take a risk-based approach to your network for proactively looking for where should I spend my time. The vulnerability list that you got handed, Raf, you're not going to go fix all 1,200 of those. So where do you optimize for what's most likely to occur, right, with your limited time? And then the reactive threat side, right? Making sure you're able to find that the signal from the noise, right? And that's really the keys, right? Is you need automation as a key part of that, because the attackers are automating, so we have to automate our defenses.
Just to while Jim's thinking, because I can see the hamster getting on the wheel. Does the world of remote work and the SASE, SSE, zero trust, network access, blah, 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 is that a direct descendant of old school network access control and even the evolved version, or is that something new?
It's not just that. So you were in the corporate network, you had a firewall on the outer edge, you had an IDS, IPS, and then you probably had something like NAC. And then you send everybody home, especially at COVID, right? Everybody goes home.
And took all of it away.
and you take all of it away. So how do you repair those layers of defense? You can't go. We actually did a project, a former company we were looking at. Could we put a stack in each person's home office, right, and have them connect to that stack? It's doable, hard to maintain, horrible, very expensive, right? So then you got to go SASE, and that's fine. And from work from anywhere, SASE is great for IT. For your networks, which still have manufacturing, still have robots, still have biomed, still have smart boards and badge access systems, you need to take still the network security approach. So those that think they can go from a perimeterized network to a deperimeterized, like let's treat every network like Starbucks, are forgetting that big part, that the amount of unmanaged devices exceeds the amount of managed devices in almost every organization today.
You said something earlier, if you don't mind me asking you this question. You said not only do you have to interrogate these things, we were earlier part, but you have to do it constantly if there's a change, right?
Yeah.
And I think for us, those of us who have been around for a bit, that's like today, that's called zero trust. I'm just going to phrase it that way, right? So where do you see that evolving? So network access control, I don't know how to answer Raf's question. Actually, I don't know if it's a replacement or augmenting when we talk about SASE, but what do you think is the next evolution of that pre and post connection? Because it's not going. Are we going to be looking at not just what my agent can see, but what other agents that are on the system that I can interrogate? Like, what if you go, hey, there's EDR running on this. Let me exploit that understanding.
Yeah, we do that today. We have over 200 ecosystem partners we integrate with. We could say CrowdStrike has a high severity confidence alert, now put in an isolation segment. It's really all about automation these days, right? And we have over 200 different automation actions. So for instance, continuously monitoring somebody. I just went and uninstalled my CrowdStrike. Corporate policy says I have to have CrowdStrike on my laptop. Should I isolate that person and prevent their access to the network, or should I just go and reinstall CrowdStrike? That's an automation choice, right? And that might save a trouble ticket for the help desk. That might save security alerts. I think that's where things are heading. Things are heading towards, I want to make things as self-repairable as they possibly can be, and not take a hard line to everything. Otherwise, I risk, shutting down systems. We have a solar farm we're working with and a wind production facility. I can take down an individual cell, no problem. I can automate that process. The central controller for all the cells that's managing all the power distribution, do I want to automate? No, right? So you got to make a choice. The CFO's laptop, sure, maybe I could take that down. The system that's keeping the air conditioning running in the stadium, probably not a great idea to take that down. So, yeah.
But I think that the answer is, and we're up on time, but I think the answer, that's a great way to end it, Jim. Thank you. But I think the answer to some of this stuff is it's progressive, right? Like just like we have, like the first time you uninstall the agent, you're like, all right, put that back. Second time, you're like, all right, put that back. Now you're gonna sit in the corner for a minute. Third time, like, are you doing something malicious? Because this is are you being stupid or malicious? And I'm gonna err on the side of like 3 times, 3 strikes you're out. So I think that the automation gives us the opportunity to be progressive in that and kind of step up. Each time we see a violation, we're like, all right, first time could have been an error. Second time, all right, you're just dumb. Third time, you're an idiot, and you should be off this network. Like you can't do that, right? All right. Well, this has been a tremendously informative 30 minutes with you, Justin. I appreciate the history lesson, and I think I keep saying this on almost every episode. I've learned something, which is interesting. Because there is so much still left to be learned. But we really need to do this again. And I don't know if you want to come back, Justin, or if I got to go find somebody that knows that wants to talk zero trust and ZTNA and all the other stuff. Yeah, Jim's like, yeah, I'm out. Yeah, because I'm not convinced the new stuff is any better than what the old stuff was, and I think it's just a repackage for the new world, but maybe I don't know. We'll have to talk that through. Anyway, Justin, thanks for being on our show, man. This is this is good. Thanks for the history lesson and the analog stuff in the background there, Jim. Always a pleasure to have you, and well done on the door opening there. That's
thank you,
guys. If you don't, if you're not watching our videos, then you missed that gag, and you totally have to go watch. That's really well done. Now you got to level that up somehow, Jim. There's got to be like now, where do you go from here?
There's a plan. I have a plan.
Oh, I love this. This is going to be great. I love it. All right, folks, thank you for listening to the Down to Security Rabbit Hole podcast, -1 James Jardine for today. And I know you guys saw it. Maybe you've looked at the show notes every once in a while, but do please take a peek at the show notes. There is an option now. I think it should go out with this show or maybe with the last one, that you can actually send us direct feedback while you're listening to the podcast from your player. It'll send a text of some sort through the system, and it'll pop up in my console. Don't all try it right now, but it might be kind of cool to see like direct feedback as you're listening. Like, oh yeah, that was a great point, or what the hell were you talking about, or maybe more guests or something. I don't know, but give that a shot. And of course, as always, for the last month or so, 2 months or so, I've got a ability to donate, buy us a cup of coffee, something stronger perhaps, if you feel like doing so, because we bring content, good stuff to your ears, and have guests like Jim and Justin on the podcast here. So that was it. Justin, Jim, thanks for being here, folks. Thank you for listening. Cue the music. We are as Dennis Miller would say, that's the news, and I am out of here.